Hey there, this is Akshay Madan. Welcome back to a new video, and in this video we are going to compare the top 3 cross-platform frameworks that are present in the market for mobile app development, and they are nothing but Flutter, React Native and Ionic, right? So yes, they are the 3 top frameworks, and one by one we are going to see them. So what I've done is I've created a presentation, and on the top there is a point, and I'm going to compare all these 3 frameworks for that point, right? So without wasting more time, let's go to our first point, and that is nothing but you can see the chart, right? So this is a Google Trends chart, and on this chart I can see that the Flutter has crossed the popularity of React Native in around 2020, and currently Flutter is the most popular framework that is present in the market. And after that there is React Native, and below that we can find Ionic. So Ionic is one of the oldest frameworks, but we can't see much popularity in Ionic, right? So currently, yes, Flutter is the most popular framework according to the Google Trends, like number of website search hits that are reported by Google, right? So yes, Flutter is the most popular framework, and after that React Native, and after that Ionic is there, right? So moving on to the next point, yes, who made them and when they made it, right? So yes, Flutter is made by Google. It was launched publicly in 2018. React Native was launched by Facebook in 2015, and Ionic was built by Driffy company in 2013. So yes, Ionic is the oldest framework, but Flutter and React Native are more popular, maybe because they are built by Google and Facebook, like multinational companies. And yes, I'm going to cover all the points, so I will not go into deeper part in this page only, right? So these 3 companies are behind Flutter, React Native and Ionic, right? Moving on to the next point, on which languages they are built on, or which languages they particularly mainly use, right? So as we know that Flutter is using Dart, React Native is based on JavaScript, C, C++ and Python. But if you are going to work with React Native, you just need to know JavaScript and TypeScript, right? So with JavaScript, you are all set to work with React Native, right? And Ionic uses HTML, CSS and some other styling languages, right? Talking about the libraries, Flutter and React Native are having a lot of libraries and inbuilt packages and community driven packages, open source packages, but Ionic lacks there also, right? So if you are a developer, if you're a beginner, then you should keep this in mind, that you're going to get a lot more open source support for Flutter and React Native than Ionic, right? Talking about the community support, how I have ranked them. So if you will go on Stack Overflow, almost 42% of the developers are using JavaScript, and as you know that React Native uses JavaScript, so this basically improves the rank of React Native over here. But if you are going to go on GitHub and you are going to search for React Native Flutter, then you are going to get more GitHub stars for Flutter repository, the Flutter official repository, right? But yes, if you talk about Stack Overflow support and developer support, then yes, React Native has more supporters, right? The open source work done for React Native is much more than Flutter and Ionic, right? So this is the point. Moving on to the next point, performance. So talking about the performance includes like hot reload function, then navigation fastness, how fast your UI is getting rendered, right? How your code is getting compiled, how fast it is. Earlier, the Flutter performance used to be a bit more than React Native, but the recent launch of React Native architecture has made it equal to Flutter, right? So currently, if you're going to like compare them based on performance, React Native and Flutter are totally same. All the features while running your application you're going to get in Flutter, they are same for React Native also, right? So yes, Ionic is a bit below in the performance. As you know that Ionic is using HTML and CSS, so their performance decreases, and React Native and Flutter are using the specially designed languages for application development, right? So here the performance increases for these 2 frameworks, right? Moving on to the next point, that is developer experience. So this rating I have done based on some answers that I found on Quora, Stack Overflow, and my friends that are using these 3 technologies. So I have found that Flutter developers are quite happy. They are happy with the support. They're happy with the GitHub support, open source support, packages, how well maintained the packages are there on pub.dev. I have found that they are happy. And myself, I'm also a Flutter developer. I see that the documentation of the packages is much better in Flutter than React Native, right? So talking about the Ionic, I've talked to some people and they are currently seeking to change their career from Ionic to Flutter and React Native. So that's why I gave it 3 stars, and Flutter 5 stars, and React Native 4 stars, right? So this is the reason behind this rating, right? I hope you will get a better idea if you are going to use them on your own, right? In your daily life, if you are going to use them, then you're going to get the better idea, right? So next factor is UI experience, the user interface experience. So this is completely based on the users, right? How users are rating the apps which are built in React Native, Flutter and Ionic, right? So talking about the React Native, it uses UI kit on iOS, Android's layout system on Android, and DOM, that is document object model, on the web. So this was about React Native. Talking about Flutter, Flutter renders its UI using Skia. So Skia is nothing but a 2D library. You just go on Google, search for Skia, and you're going to get this. So Skia is also being used by Google Chrome and other Google products for rendering the UI, right? So it's a 2D library. This lets them optimize the performance and do custom UIs without being constrained by the platform's primitives, right? So this you need to do a little bit research on this. What is Skia? Because if you don't know about Skia, then you are not going to relate with it. So what's a 2D library? You need to search it. But yes, React Native uses UI kit and Flutter uses Skia. Right, Ionic, it is totally dependent on web technologies like HTML and CSS, but it uses Cordova, which is again another framework which is based on Ionic, and it is used to gain the user experience of native apps. So let's say you have built a web app and now you want to convert your web app to a native Android and iOS app, then you can use Cordova. So these are the 3 technologies that are being used by these 3 frameworks, right? So talking about the UI experience, there is not much difference between the user interface experience. All the 3 users are happy, but they sometimes find glitch if the app is built in Ionic, which uses Cordova. So if you want my overview, my point of view on Ionic, so if you are building a startup and you don't have much bigger team who knows Flutter, React Native or native technologies, then let's say you have built a web app using some web technologies. Now if you want to convert your web app to Android and iOS app also, then you can use Ionic and completely and fastly convert your web app code to application, the mobile application code, right? Then you can use Ionic. But if you are going to consider the UI experience and some other factors, then definitely hire the people who are expert in React Native, Flutter and native tech, right? Talking about the native integration experience, React Native has 1 star less from Flutter. It's not because the native integration experience is bad in React Native, right? So this 1 less star is only due to the documentation. The documentation of Flutter is quite comprehensive and quite better than React Native, right? So in Flutter, they are having platform channels. So it's just a class and you can use this class to write your code in Kotlin and Swift. That is your native side code, right? So this makes the native integration much simpler because the documentation of platform channels is much easier and much easier to read and understand, right? Talking about the React Native, both of them are having the same native integration capabilities, right? None of them is less and none of them is more in the native integration experience and capability, right? Both of them are equal. Just the documentation part of React Native is not that good as Flutter, right? So this helps Flutter to get 1 more star in this native integration experience point. Talking about the Ionic native. So this is another term. Ionic native is a TypeScript wrapper for Cordova. We have already talked about Cordova. Plugins that makes adding any native functionality you need to add in your Ionic mobile app easy, right? So you can use Ionic native to add the native integration capability in your Ionic app, right? So which is a TypeScript wrapper. So yes, all 3 of them are having the native integration capability. Just the Flutter leads over here because of the documentation. The documentation of Ionic is not that good. Then React Native is better than Ionic, but Flutter is having the best documentation for this point, right? Next point is cost of development. All 3 are open source, but Flutter and React Native are totally open source. You can use them. You can use any of their features, any of the classes, any of the packages totally for free. Talking about the Ionic, for Ionic you need to have a paid version for professional development tools, right? So here Ionic is not completely open source, right? It's commercial and you need to pay a little bit for getting the professional development tools. If you want to have a market ready product, then you need to pay something to Ionic to get more capabilities, right? Jobs. If you want to talk about the jobs, React Native leads here, right? Because React Native uses JavaScript. So all the web developers who are using React, they can also learn some skills and they can also become React Native developers, right? Because both of them are having JavaScript. So this is why companies are preferring React Native. Companies used to prefer, I don't know about the future, but currently the vacancies for React Native are more compared to Flutter and Ionic, right? So if you want to learn a technology for a job purpose, then go ahead with React Native till now, but we can't predict the future right now, right? So 48,000 vacancies are there on Angel list till today. Today is 10th of October 2022, right? And for Flutter, they are having 14,800 vacancies. For Ionic, as expected, they are having lesser vacancies because not more companies are using Ionic. Mostly freelancers uses Ionic, and some companies to faster their development and fasten their launching of the product if they are having the web product already in the hand, right? So React Native leads over here. Talking about the freelance jobs, Upwork or Fiverr I have considered. There also React Native pending tasks are more than Flutter and Ionic, right? So 4,694 tasks are already pending on Upwork. You can, if you are a React Native developer, you can just go and apply for these tasks and you can bid them, right? Flutter is having 1,083 pending tasks and Ionic 217, right? So this was all about the freelance jobs that are available for these three frameworks. React Native leads over here, right? So now what to choose? So if you want to get a simple answer in just one line, my answer would be, if you already know JavaScript, if you have worked with web technologies using React, MongoDB or HTML, CSS, you have already worked with it, go ahead with React Native. You are already familiar with JavaScript. You have already built projects in JavaScript. So it won't take you more than a 1 week or 2 weeks time to grab your hands on React Native too. But if you are just starting now, then go ahead with Flutter, right? Because Flutter documentation is very clean and a number of videos, tutorials of Flutter are also more enhanced on YouTube and other Udemy or Udacity places also. And one thing, like I really like Flutter because of its documentation. It's very easy to understand. So if you don't have any prior experience in app development, web development, then also you can directly read it. It's just like a book, right? So that's why I will suggest Flutter for beginners, right? So if you're in first year, second year, you can go ahead with Flutter. But if you already have the experience of JavaScript, go ahead with React Native. Talking about the Ionic, Ionic I won't suggest to a beginner, right? Because Ionic, it was launched in 2013 and still it hasn't beaten up React Native and Flutter. So I think future will be there in React Native and Flutter. Any one of them will be the market leader, right? And second will be the second market leader. But I don't see vision in Ionic. So for a beginner, right? So yeah, this is my suggestion to you. But finally, it's your decision. So I hope you like this video. Till the next content, keep coding, keep innovating, and thanks a lot.